Welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I wanted to tackle today's topic, which is the real cost of seed-to-sale errors and how small tracking mistakes can destroy cannabis margins. I wanted to dive into this topic because I've been seeing a lot of violations out there regarding the seed-to-sale tracking systems. Before I dive in, a little background about myself. I got my start working in the cannabis industry here in Colorado in 2009, and in 2015, I founded my company, ICS Consulting. I help operators navigate the regulatory cannabis landscape across the United States. I'm going to go ahead and dive in. The first piece I want to talk about is compliance versus profitability. Most operators, they think about the seed-to-sale errors as a compliance problem, but if we looked at them as a profitability problem, it might look a little bit different. A few grams missing from inventory might seem insignificant. And as somebody who does audits at these facilities, whether that's a inventory audit or a regular compliance audit, I check everyone's adjustments and metrics. And that really tells the story of your loss, and not only inventory loss, but the financial loss. And it's amazing when I'm seeing people adjusting 100 grams here, 30 grams, 50 grams there. And I'm curious if people are adding up these numbers and wondering how much money they're losing every month or on an annual basis. And so a package adjustment, it might seem like an administrative issue or just a compliance issue, and we got to clean up our inventory and make this look clean so it looks good for the regulators. Also, a failed POS metric integration may seem like something he needs to fix. I have seen some integration failures. My own clients have experienced it where sales weren't reporting accurately for a couple months and they were having weird glitches in the system. And we know with technology, not everything's perfect and these issues do arise and they do happen. But every one of these, problems that I listed, they all have a real cost. And the real cost always isn't the inventory discrepancy itself. It can include the loss of potential revenue, the inventory loss of your product, just the labor costs in general of trying to figure out issues going on in the metric system, the investigation time, and I'll dive a little bit into the investigation later, accounting corrections. I do know a lot of accountants use the seed-to-sale tracking software, obviously, to track numbers for the dispensary side. They're tracking sales so they can report taxes appropriately. Compliance exposures, operational disruption, and really just lost opportunities. 17 years I've been working in cannabis operations. I've seen how these small operational issues can become much larger problems. A lot of times they get swept under the rug. I usually get called when the bleep has hit the fan and it's become so overwhelming, or they can't get the issues figured out between the POS system and the inventory tracking system. And I'll have to come in and help investigate and figure out the issues. That money, it adds up. The goal isn't to scare operators. My goal really is to get people thinking differently and trying to look at things through a different lens. That's always been my goal, is to shift everyone's perspective in the fear and the reactionary states. And I want to try to move people to getting to where they're more prepared and they can easily adapt and be proactive in the cannabis industry. So compliance isn't separate from profitability. It's absolutely tied. And gosh, I'm trying to think exactly how this phrase goes. And I've heard many people say it, including myself, over the last decade or so, that a lot of these operators, you really own a compliance company. That's what you're running. It should be compliance first and everything else follows. That's just how it is when you're this regulated and this under the microscope in the cannabis industry. I want to talk about the 2% problem. I did a lot of research. There is some data out there that I was able to get from metric and POS platforms and whatnot. And so I came up with the 2% problem. A 2% inventory variance, it sounds pretty small. Operators may dismiss it as shrinkage, waste, moisture loss, accounting errors, employee mistakes, or just part of the business. So if you have $500,000 in inventory times 2%, that equals $10,000. And so take whatever amount of math, whether you have $50,000 worth of inventory in your facility, or even if you're a cultivation facility, you don't necessarily have to be a dispensary. Cultivation facilities, they experience waste and inventory loss. I do believe dispensaries probably have the most inventory loss and issues. Of course, I believe manufacturers and cultivators can have loss. There could be recalls, or maybe they have to destroy a crop because it got infested with insects or bugs or something, or powdery mildew, and those issues come up. But really, dispensaries need to look at their losses here and how much money they're losing. You want to ask yourself, what does that $10,000 represent in your business? Is it lost inventory? Is it lost potential revenue? Is it unexplained inventory? Is it incorrect accounting? Is it a process failure? I would say it's all of those. I would like to be distinct here in that the 2% that I'm talking about, it represents inventory that isn't being accurately accounted for. So the total business cost can be much larger than the inventory value itself. You have to add the cost of investigating and correcting the discrepancy, and that's what I'm factoring in here. I want to talk about the margin trap and defining the trap. A small operational error creates a much larger financial burden. I've seen on people's metric systems, I've come across a 400 to 500 gram adjustments in the inventory system, and ownership did not know. Nobody knew. An employee that didn't know what they were doing went in and they made those adjustments. Sometimes there's theft. I have talked about theft on my podcast a lot. It's not people breaking in and robbing these facilities. They're highly secure. Some of them have armed guards, cameras everywhere. Dispensaries definitely get robbed and have burglaries and all those things. But the percentage from the data and my research that I've been doing the last 2 years and talking with security experts, they are telling me it's 70% is internal theft. And so if employees are going in and adjusting and making 500 gram adjustments, why? What's going on? Where did 400 joints go? Or where did that 300 grams go? And why did we lose 300 grams and nobody knows where it went? And so these are issues that are coming up. It's a real problem. So all of a sudden, let's just say somebody discrepancies out an eighth, and that eighth was $50. You can't figure out, where did the eighth go? You don't know where it went. It's unaccounted for. You can't find it anywhere. And now you're doing the investigation to figure out how to fix this discrepancy. The management's involved or the metric person's involved. And all of a sudden you have a $200 labor problem, because now instead of doing something else that employee could have been working on in the business, they're now trying to figure out what's going on with this $50 problem. And now it becomes a $200 problem. And that's before the opportunity cost. I would like to bring up, I did some research as well, that in some states, not all states, but some states, they do have regulations regarding discrepancies. Specifically in Maryland is a good example of where these costs and compliance merge and become issues for operators. Maryland regulations state that if a dispensary finds a discrepancy between the physical inventory and the seed-to-sale system that is greater than 0.5% of total product weight or items, they must begin an investigation within 1 business day. If they cannot resolve the discrepancy, they must report it to the regulators in Maryland. The regulation also says failure to report an unresolved discrepancy may be used as evidence of diversion. They take it very serious. And I know there's other states that have these discrepancy rules in there regarding inventory and doing an investigation. How much does it cost you to do that investigation? How many labor hours are put towards that investigation because of these discrepancies and a messy inventory system and bad data in, which means bad data out? The original mistake is cheap, right? The investigation is expensive. That's the part that costs more money. And also, you're under the regulator microscope, and now you're being scrutinized for inefficiencies in your seed-to-sale tracking system. I would like to remind everyone, metric is not your compliance tool for your business. Metric is a diversion tool for the state in tracking you to make sure there's no diversion out there with cannabis and it's not being diverted somewhere else, and that it's completely tracked from seed or plant or clone to sale until it walks out the door with the customer. And all life cycles of a cannabis operation are tracked in the metric system. It's a compliance tool for you to be in compliance with the state, but it's not your POS system. It's really not your compliance system. It's really the government tracking you and how you're managing these regulated products, regulated cannabis. They're tracking all your packages, all your material, all your plant materials, all the way up till it goes out the door. So best practice, you want to track the number of inventory adjustments. I can't tell you how many times I bring this up over and over again. That adjustment section in metric is everything. You need to pay attention, run reports, see what your employees are doing in the system, how many adjustments are making. What kind of policies do you have in your business? What if you're not in Maryland? What if you're in Colorado, which we don't really have any discrepancy parameters here, really? So what's your business going to do? Are you going to set a margin or a discrepancy percentage that they have to notify you as an owner in your business? I would 100% recommend having that set up, because that's going to put up bumpers for employees not to be sloppy and to take their time and to make sure that they're doing the data entry correctly. Back to best practices, you want to track time spent correcting them. The number of recurring discrepancies. How often are you having these discrepancies? The cost of reconciliation, departments that are involved in these corrections. I would say, too, how often are you doing inventory? A lot of times I find discrepancies honestly happen because really people are horribly bad at doing physical inventory counting. And a lot of times people don't really count. They use metric just to go into the adjustment section and zero it out, and they rely on that feature instead of actually doing a physical inventory count. And I can just go in. I don't have time to figure this out. I don't have time to investigate. They just go in and make the adjustment. That's really lazy inventory management, and I highly recommend that people don't do that. It's really not a good way to do inventory tracking. I want to talk about the hidden labor drain and who's actually fixing these problems. Is it an inventory manager? Is it the compliance manager? Is it the operations manager, owner, someone on the executive level? What could that person have been doing if they weren't trying to fix all these problems and issues? They could be reviewing sales, managing inventory turns, training employees, improving the customer experience, reviewing purchasing, reducing stagnant inventory, developing new revenue opportunities, and managing staff, plus probably about the other 30, 40 things that I could list. Everyone has a lot going on in these operations. Everyone's busy. some best practices regarding this hidden labor drain that I'm talking about is you want to track your compliance correction hours and you want to use it as an operational KPI. So for those who are tracking your KPIs, this is really important. Really think about it. Are you considering this part of the labor hours that you're tracking? For anyone who's tracking their labor hours and what these hours are going towards and how much it's costing you and whether or not you're running your business efficiently and it's lean and mean and a money-making machine, if that's something that you're looking for. But whether or not you want to make a lot of money or not, why would you waste money and throw it out the window like this? It's really important. You want to track how much are your staff working on fixing these deficiencies every week. If they're not doing physical inventory and counting inventory to make sure it's clean and they're waiting a month, you're going to spend probably 2 to 3 times more labor hours trying to fix. The issues will just keep compounding and piling on. It's really such a waste of labor and a waste of time and a waste of money. When you are efficient and you do inventory every day, physical inventory, and if you have a lot of SKUs, I tell people do category inventory audits. Monday, you do flower. Tuesday, you do concentrates, and so on. And you divide cannabis up into the categories, and then you audit that category that day. I worked at a facility where we did physical inventory in the morning and when we closed. The owner was specifically super anal about inventory. But let me tell you, we had extremely clean inventory. Everything was always reconciled. We never had really big surprises or big adjustments. Everything was always tracked, and we knew where everything was at regarding inventory, and we had a really good process in place. I don't recommend people doing inventory twice a day unless you're super anal, but once a day is definitely enough. And for those who are smaller, you can do inventory once a week. Do inventory on your slow day. If you don't have slow days, you can do inventory an hour before you open. We used to do inventory 2 hours before we opened, and we did inventory in the mornings before customers showed up. There's really a way to figure it out. I always get like that nails on a chalkboard feeling when someone tells me, oh yeah, we don't really do physical inventory. Whatever's missing, we just fix it in metric and make the adjustment. I would highly recommend avoiding doing that. Treat those compliance correction hours, fixing discrepancies, into a KPI. You want to ask, how many management hours are we spending every month fixing preventable data problems? And they are preventable. If you're having the issues that's telling you to use it as a roadmap, it's really saying, hey, this isn't working. What we're doing is not working. We need to fix it. We need to correct this. We have to try a different path, a different process, and tighten up the process and try something different and see if it works better. Because just going through the motions and just saying, oh, it's too much, we're just going to keep having all these discrepancies and throwing money out the window and just saying, oh, it's just the cannabis industry. That's just what it means to own one of these facilities. It seems like such a waste of energy and money to even do that. Next, I want to discuss the employee burnout cycle. I'm going to explain the cycle here, and this is regarding inventory tracking. So we have the error that I talked about that we would get in our seed-to-sale tracking system or metric, depending what state that you're in. Then we have our investigation. Then we have our frustration. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's like error, frustration, investigation, but I'll go with it here. So frustration, more procedures. Now I got to do more paperwork. Now I'm rushed because I got way too much on my plate. I'm wearing 50 different hats in my position. And then you have employees, and then you have more errors. Why this happens? There's too much manual data entry. It's complicated workflows. The workflows are a total mess. I would even say some people don't even have workflows. The workflow is whatever happens, that's our workflow. We don't even think about workflows. Workflows don't even exist in my stratosphere. We've never even talked about a workflow. And trust me, there are operators and dispensaries out there that do not have any organization or any plan or anything designed around workflows whatsoever. Or if they did, they're not even engaged with it. Another piece is, like I said, the complicated workflows or lack of workflows, a poor system integration, lack of training. I would say that's the number one. I recently was in the metric portal going through all the training, and it's a lot of the on-demand training. And yeah, it's wonderful. Lots of content in there. However, it's not the same as somebody sitting down with you in person and training. And especially for brand new people that have never done this before, brand new operators, this is their first time on the metric seed-to-sale system. That training really does nothing. It's a precursor. It sets you up to get you familiar, understanding the language, but it doesn't really help when you dive in there and things go wrong. It is a challenge. It's a lot of feedback that I hear from operators that they take all the training and they complain about it. And I think that has to do with because it's on demand. And I think a lot of people are visual and muscle memory learners when they get on these systems. And it's a lot easier to have somebody come in and physically train them, show them how to fix something, and have them do it personally where they're learning it and understanding that they're doing it the right way. I think the on-demand, we lose a little bit there with the on-demand training that's in metric. And I think that's why it's a struggle for some people. I would also say on top of the training, which I think is the number one issue, I work with people and I come in and I do their audit. I'll put down on my audit report, staff needs to go back into metric and take more training. What I find is when I come back in 6 months to do the audit again, I find out they never took training. That's the problem, is nobody's holding anyone accountable. I could come in and tell people till I'm blue in the face, you need metric training. I'm going to sit here on this podcast and tell you till I'm blue in the face that you need to take metric training. But the problem is you can't make somebody, like that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink water. And no matter how hard I try, I can't make people take the metric training in the portal. And there's tons of videos. I just was recently in there going through with one of my clients. It's not the same as getting trained in person. And it's really not. And it really comes down to who's holding who accountable, who in the business is making sure that everyone's going and getting trained. Are you tracking it? How do you know? And I think this area gets loosey-goosey, in my opinion. Also, inconsistent SOPs, no clear ownership. This is that taking accountability piece that I think is a really big struggle for some people. Employees don't understand the why. A lot of times not everyone, but some businesses, they just throw employees into it. They throw them in the gauntlet and nobody explains why they're doing it. They don't really have really good job role descriptions or why it is that we do the things that we do, or what is all this silly compliance stuff that I have to do. Cannabis is still pretty new, even though I've been in it 17 years. It's still relatively new, and there's still a lot of markets that are just opening up, and there's employees still learning for the first time, and there's employees who weren't taught the right way, and they're doing things incorrectly. And there's some people who are really good at what they do, and they are doing the inventory correctly. But it's important to teach employees the why. Why are you asking them to do this? Why is this important? Have you talked to them to help them understand? Training alone, it won't fix a broken workflow. That's for sure. You have to actually create a really good workflow, train people, designate it, and then you have to hold people accountable. All those things have to work together for it to happen. You need better processes, better technology, a clear accountability, strong SOPs. If you already have SOPs, get them updated. Routine reconciliation. I would say this is number 2 and where people are really bad when it comes to their inventory. They don't reconcile at the end of the business day. And I would say in a good amount of states, it is in the regulations that you are responsible for reconciling by the end of the business day. So best practice is when you find a reoccurring error, don't just ask who made the mistake. Ask, why did our system allow this mistake to happen? Why did our processes allow this to happen? That's a much better operational question, because then you're asking investigative questions to try to get to a solution. When one discrepancy becomes a bigger compliance problem, and I've seen these things blow up in businesses, it always starts small. And sometimes it can start big too. If somebody's sitting there adjusting and zeroing out 500 grams in your system, you've got an issue. But it starts small: 3 grams, 2 grams, 1 gram, 1 joint, 1 vape pen, and it goes on, and it builds and builds. I'll get to it. I'm overwhelmed. I have too much going on. Oh, now it's so big that I don't think I can even untangle this ball of mess. Now we're going to have to hire a consultant to come in and help us and get this cleaned up. I would like to talk about, before I dive into this one discrepancy becomes a bigger compliance problem, that cannabis compliance and regulations, they're very state specific. I try to broadly talk about these examples, and I bring up different states as examples, but it's really important to really understand what your requirements are. Metric is different for every state. Yes, there's universal manual for metric, but because every state is different regarding their regulations, especially around the seed-to-sale. For example, in Michigan, they have different requirements in their metric compared to what we have in Colorado. And it's really important that you understand what is required in your seed-to-sale tracking system in your state. What is allowable in Michigan may not be allowable in Colorado or Missouri or California, and so on. States have different reconciliation requirements, reporting thresholds, correction procedures, audit requirements, and enforcement policies. One isolated error is different from a reoccurring pattern. So, single error, repeated error, unexplained discrepancy, pattern, regulatory concern. Regulators may care less about whether someone meant to make a mistake and more about whether the business has adequate controls. Remember, it's about site control, product control, inventory control, supply chain management, chain of custody. All these terminologies that we use in the cannabis industry, it all comes back to some type of control mechanism of tracking and compliance and accountability. A best practice: when a discrepancy occurs, you want to identify it, investigate it, document it, determine the root cause. That's why you ask those questions, to get to the root cause, and correct the process and monitor for reoccurrence. You should be doing CAPA. If you're having major issues with your inventory, you can use the CAPA standard to help you figure this out. In Colorado, we're required to have a CAPA SOP, dispensaries, cultivators, manufacturers. You can use your CAPA to do this investigation. If you're not in Colorado, just look up CAPA. I'm sure there's plenty of templates out there that you can find that will go over the steps for CAPA. And CAPA is corrective action and preventative action. And it's basically a system used in business and manufacturing, but I think it's great for regulated cannabis. It basically sets you up to put together an investigation, figure out the root cause on what happens. Let's just say 1,000 grams got adjusted in the system, but we don't know where it went. You could do an investigation and go through the process of the CAPA. The CAPA will help you determine what the cause for that 1,000 grams getting adjusted improperly. And then what's going to happen is it's going to give you a corrective action. And then you're going to take that corrective action and you're going to apply it. And then you're going to update your SOPs to then reflect the new process that you got from doing the CAPA investigation. It's a really helpful tool. Any regular small operator can do it. You do not have to be a large cannabis company with lots of employees. Anyone could look this information up on the internet and get their CAPA going. That's what that best practice and how that discrepancy, if you use a CAPA to help you get there, it's going to really help you out a lot. And then make sure you update your SOPs. The invisible accounting gap, the physical reality versus the digital reality. Cannabis inventory physically changes. There's moisture loss, processing issues with harvest, waste, testing, sampling, packaging, transfer, and conversions. But all those physical events have to be represented digitally, right? They all happen physically, but they're going to be represented in the metric platform. So the problem, your warehouse system or just your system at your dispensary, your POS, your seed-to-sale system, and your accounting system, they all tell different stories. And gosh, is that the truth? Sometimes what you actually have in your vault, your physical inventory, doesn't match what you actually have in the system. And nowadays, the POS systems are incredibly integrated. It's basically another arm of your metric system. There's these things called digital shadows. The system says inventory exists, but physically you can't find it. Physical inventory exists, the system doesn't reflect it. Inventory exists, wrong packaging and location status. The POS says one thing, metric says another. I've lived that story, my gosh, over and over again. And I live it with my clients too. They have the same issues. I recently just had it within the last year. The POS system, there were all these discrepancies and they couldn't even find it in metric. And then the POS system was saying it was there and it wasn't even in metric. And it was a big hot mess that we had to comb through with not only metric, but we had to get the POS software company involved as well. Accounting says one thing, inventory records say another. So the consequences are over ordering, under ordering, a stagnant inventory, stuff just sitting there and not moving. You have capital that's tied up in your inventory, incorrect inventory valuation, increased reconciliation, compliance risk. And it is a big compliance risk. And I always talk about the circle of risk and how big is that circle. These consequences actually make your circle of risk larger, and it's putting your business at risk. The best practice, your goal should be physical inventory equals seed-to-sale data equals POS data equals accounting data. They don't necessarily need to be identical at every moment, but there needs to be a controlled and explainable relationship between them. Good data in, good data out. And I learned that 17 years ago when I started in the cannabis industry. I worked on some weird POS systems. They're not even around anymore. There were no cannabis POS systems when I started. They were like POS systems for clothing stores, like these random things that it was unbelievable, the random POS systems that were free for those who have been at it for a while. Remember all the free POS systems? This was before metric. This was before people were doing inventory control, seed-to-sale tracking that was mandated by the state. And there were just some really strange systems that we were on. Systems that restaurants were using one time. We were on a system that was used for car parts. And so a lot of wild stuff. But it's just important to understand all these categories and how they all relate to each other and how they should read when you're reviewing or auditing these systems. I do want to bring up AI-driven discrepancy detection. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I do not know enough about this yet. This is something that has been relatively new in the industry. I'm going to try to see if I can find somebody from one of the POS platforms to come on my podcast and maybe talk about this. I do not know enough about it. But what I'm hearing from a couple clients, that it's a game changer. It's a game changer. And AI could potentially identify patterns that humans miss. Instead of simply asking, where are we missing inventory? AI-driven analytics could potentially ask, which products have reoccurring variations? which locations have the highest discrepancy rates, which transactions create the most corrections, are certain processes generating repeated errors, are discrepancies concentrated around particular workflows, are certain integrations failing repeatedly. So this is great. This is going to be awesome. And that's all I can give you. I'm really sorry. It's not my area of expertise, but I am excited to learn more. I'm going to keep trying to learn more. And like I said, I'll try to find someone to come on who is way smarter than me about it. The feedback that I'm getting from customers, they said it's really incredible how much it's helping them with some of these issues in their metric system. Machine learning could potentially identify where that 2% is that I was talking about in the beginning. And that's going to actually be a game changer for profitability and help your numbers and costs. And so that's something to think about. I want to point out that AI is not going to replace your compliance person. It's not going to replace accountability and professionalism and your staff and having to understand that compliance is woven into every decision. It's really a tool. It's a tool to make you all better when it comes to this regulated market. But it's not, oh, let's just go fire all of our people that manage our inventory. Now we're just going to have an AI bot manage it. I just don't really see even the state regulators allowing that to happen or rules and regulations allowing that to happen. But it is going to help your inventory management team and compliance people immensely with their job with inventory. I want to dive into seed-to-sale accuracy as a financial KPI. So you want to stop treating seed to sale as only compliance. I mentioned earlier, it's definitely more in compliance, and the regulators look at it completely differently than you do. It is a government tracking and diversion detection tool. Straight up, that's what it is. And your POS system is your transactional data source. One, use the data in your POS system. I think on my podcast last week or the week before, Gail Rand was on, and we were talking about how people don't use their dashboard. They don't use the data that are in these systems that they're paying money for to help them make decisions or to find out their KPIs, to help them make choices in their business. Management and or owners should consider tracking the inventory variance, the number of adjustments. Everyone should be looking at their adjustments. I'm going to say that like all the time on every episode, but everyone should be tracking their adjustments. Unexplained discrepancies, reconciliation hours, failed integrations. This is for tracking KPIs. Package corrections, waste variance, inventory aging, recurring discrepancies, and cost of corrections. So the best practice is to put a dollar value on compliance problems. On all the things that I listed, how much is that costing you? What's the KPI? What's the hours lost with that? And what systems can you put in place that will help you in those areas and start saving you money and putting that money back in the business in a good way? And once again, this seed-to-sale AI, it could be a game changer for everyone. It could actually save people thousands of dollars notifying people of errors and whatnot that they're finding. So I can't wait for this to go full steam ahead here in our industry. Strategic framework for margin recovery. Here are some best practices that I want to talk about. You need to reconcile daily. This is not something you shouldn't be reconciling at the end of the week. This is something you should be doing at the end of every day. Don't wait until the month end. Please do not wait until the month end. Implement weekly mini audits, high-risk SKU reviews, high-value inventory reviews, fast-moving product reviews, package conversion checks, and integration checks. And if you're a manufacturer and a cultivation, I know this is very leaning towards dispensary, but the things I'm talking about today, you can easily convert over to your business, whether you're making a product or you're growing the plant, and just take out the stuff that doesn't make sense regarding the dispensary. So you want to find errors while they're still fresh, and that is the truth. I've had clients say, I'm really sorry, I should have done this months ago, and we had to go in and fix issues that were 6 months old. I've fixed metric issues that were 5 to 6 years old, believe it or not. And the longer you go, the deeper. It is really intense stuff to go back and try to clean up somebody's metric that has 5 years worth of issues. And it's not cheap. It costs a lot of money, but it's that or get shut down or get in trouble and get really huge violations. Number 2, you want to measure the correction cost. I've talked about this a couple times. You want to track the hours spent, employees involved, the number of corrections, repeat issues, cost per correction. And you want to ask, how much are we spending every month fixing these preventative problems that are coming up? Number 3, you want to build real-time visibility. The long-term goal should be real-time compliance plus inventory plus financial visibility. So some dashboard concepts would be physical inventory, digital inventory, variance, inventory age, adjustment frequency, failed integrations, outstanding discrepancies, resolution time, and financial impact on your business. Your goal should be don't discover the problem after it becomes a crisis. See the warning signs early. That's why checking adjustments every week, doing inventory a couple times a week, that's where you'll catch the early warning signs. When you let stuff pile up every month, you just drown in it and it becomes overwhelming and people begin shutting down because it's become so overwhelming, or you get a lot of employee turnover because no one's trained properly and there's no systems in place. Believe it or not, employees thrive. They thrive with structure. When there's no structure in place, that's when things total pure chaos and a mess. Employees thrive with structure. How do I know that? I learned myself. I know what it's like to live a life of a chaotic person. I wasn't always misorganized and compliant in my 20s and 30s and didn't have structure in my life. And I learned the cannabis industry really brought me to my knees, honestly, and was like, okay, this is only going to work well if you have structure in your life. It really did change everything. It was a game changer for me having structure. And I've implemented structure in facilities that I've worked in with clients, and I see it with my own eyes. It changes everything. And so it really is an important piece to be successful in these cannabis operations. So I'm going to have a best practice, quick operator checklist here. Every cannabis operator should know what's our current inventory variances, what's our dollar value of variance, how many inventory adjustments are we making each month, how many hours are employees spending fixing discrepancies, and which products have the most corrections, which locations have the most discrepancies, POS and Seed-to-Sale systems integrated, are we having any integration issues, our physical inventory versus digital inventory reconciled. Do we have a documented discrepancy SOP? Do we have any inventory SOPs? Do we have an SOP around using metric? How are we doing these discrepancies? Are we tracking reoccurring discrepancies? Do we know the regulatory reporting requirements in our state? Does a county know how inventory discrepancies are being handled? Is that getting communicated to them? Are we using any kind of technology to identify patterns before they become larger problems? Like I said, this new AI piece that's coming into the cannabis industry, those POS software companies, they're starting to integrate it into their systems. The big takeaway is the next time someone says it's only a 2% discrepancy, ask 2% of what? And just go down your list of questions. I've given you lots of different bullet points and questions to ask yourself. I don't think I need to keep repeating them over and over again. Sit down and write out that list and ask yourself those questions. The real cost of seed-to-sale errors isn't just the inventory that disappeared. It's every aspect of your business. Your inventory, it's everything. It's really, if you didn't have inventory, you wouldn't have a cannabis business. If you didn't grow the plant, what would you be doing? If you didn't manufacture the plant and create a product, what would you be doing? If you didn't buy the products from the manufacturer and the cultivation and sell it to customers, what would you be doing? It's the number one most important thing in the business is your inventory. Besides employees and all the other things, what keeps the industry going. But without the inventory, there's no cannabis industry. It's really important. Compliance, it isn't separate from profitability. They're all connected. And I've said this many times, compliance is woven into every aspect of your business, every choice, every decision that you make, every thought that you have about your business. It's from the littlest things. You want to make sure that you have accurate data, and accurate data gives operators better information. Use the data. Use the data out there. Go to your regulator website, whether you're in Colorado or Maryland or Michigan. MED has a dashboard that you can go look at, and you can get a bunch of numbers from the MED regarding what's going on in the state of Colorado. I don't know about all the other states. You'll have to go to the state website in the state that you operate in. And if there isn't that data there, then use your POS system. Go find out the data from your POS system. And also you can go into Metric, and there's all kinds of reports that you can download from Metric. Better information creates better decisions. And that is why seed-to-sale accuracy should be treated as a business performance issue and not just a compliance requirement. I hope this was helpful today. I thought just a different approach that I wanted to talk about inventory tracking. And I know before I've talked about compliance mistakes and violations and fines, but I thought it'd be interesting to come at it from a different angle and talk about how it's affecting your bottom line and profitability in your business. It's always helpful to talk about the same topics, compliance and those things, but new lenses, new perspectives, a different way of sharing and talking about it. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I just want to thank my audience. It means a lot for those who regularly listen or you're just listening for the first time. Thank you so much for following my podcast. For those who like to stream, it is streaming on Apple and Spotify and wherever you like to listen. If you like video podcasts, please check out my YouTube channel, which is at Under the Microscope with Jenny. I will see everyone on the next episode.